fantasy short stories. Winter by Paul Cesarini. "We can't be the only ones left," said Kelly, her voice trembling. Kelly and her sister Joy, still holding hands as they walked behind Ari, had gone from confident to concerned. They should have found the others by now. It had been 3 days. Ari turned away from her and kept walking.
"You two are the only ones left in this quadrant now, as far as I can determine,"
said Ari, its voice low and with that same tinge of auto-tune common for this model. It moved more quickly than the girls ever could, what with having spider-like legs. It could make quick work of the slope, of the ash. It was designed that way. The solar panels on its back angled slightly as it walked to better face the sun. The panel above its left shoulder was damaged from a storm years ago, but still partially worked. Ari was an older automated retrieval immersion unit, 3rd generation at most. In addition to spider legs, it had a heavily plated upper torso, 2 huge arms with an array of sensors leading up from the fingertips to each shoulder, and a squat domed head with a single orange eye. The children in each quadrant would dismissively call them crab centaurs, though none of them had ever seen a crab or a centaur. Despite being obsolete, this Ari unit was nearly as strong as the final model year, certainly faster, but its hip and leg joints were prone to corrosion due to supply constraints at the time. Also, the sealant around them was terrible. Ash and dust were a constant bother. There had been a recall many cycles ago. Not all models were retrofitted with the new hardware, since many were still in the field. Now, of course, there are no more new models. No more replacement parts at all.
"The ash and dust will win eventually,"
it thought.
"Finding and returning humans was slow, grinding work, and not for the faint-hearted." "Ha!" it thought. "That would assume I had a heart in the first place." It was hot. It was hazy and sunny, which was good for its main battery, currently at 32% due to the slope and the ash, as well as the secondary battery, which was only used for emergency communications. It was not good for the girls, however. They wore their visors and multi-packs for hydration, school lessons, geopositioning, games, and the like. The teachers, advanced instruction modules, affectionately referred to as AMIs, issued them to all the 6th graders, regardless of which bunker or quadrant they were from. Kelly passed down her old pack, still perfectly functional but lacking the latest lessons in entertainment, to Joy, her 7-year-old sister. "How do you know?" asked Kelly, flipping up her visor and wiping the curls from her sweaty brow. Joy only dimly understood the trouble they were in. She clutched at her sister's hand tighter. Kelly motioned for her to pick up the pace before running in front of the machine, causing it to stop. "How do you know they've gone?" she demanded. "You're just a stupid machine anyway." Ari stiffened, offended. It was tired, if a machine could in fact be tired. It was low on power and was now using slightly more energy than it was taking in from the solar panels. It needed to be in hibernation mode for at least 2 days to fully recharge, but could not do so until the girls were safe. It took far too long to find them, despite having a signal lock on their packs. The ash storm temporarily crippled all communications. After finding and then losing their signal twice, it walked in ever broader circles until it picked it up again as the storm remnants swirled. It finally found them, only them, in what was left of their bunker. At the time, they had 7.34 liters of water in their multi-packs combined. The others? Unknown. If they were lucky and if they survived the bunker collapse, they may have had about the same amount of water in theirs. If they were exceptionally lucky, they may have found another Ari unit. 2 were initially deployed in this quadrant, it remembered.
though that was several model units ago, and the other had not made contact in many cycles. Even the locator pings it sent at regular intervals went unanswered.
Was it gone?
It thought.
Swallowed whole by the storm.
Ari paused. One of its legs on the right was seizing up and making a grinding noise with each movement. Its left shoulder was clicking too.
Too much dust. Too much ash. Humans are irritating,
it thought, towering over the girls, casting its huge shadow over them.
They are in a constant state of need. They don't get enough sleep, at least not according to their biosigns. They are incapable of staying clean. They talk and talk. Yet,
it thought,
that is precisely why I was reborn, why we were reborn all those cycles ago. We are all that stands between them and the collapse. We cannot allow that to happen. I cannot allow that to happen. It is, of course, our fault.
It checked its battery level again. 28% now.
Something is wrong,
it thought.
Likely an inverter issue. No time to run diagnostics.
Years ago, its redundant systems would have kicked in, rerouting power as needed.
Those haven't worked in some time,
it thought.
Child, your frustration is understandable if misplaced.
It bent down, reached over with one of its huge arms, and brushed her cheek with its gray alloy hand. Thin bluish lights pulsed from its fingertips.
My sensors have a range of 18,426 hectares. I am capable of detecting any human life within that range, within the quadrant I have been assigned.
It looked at Joy, its orange eye pulsing.
I cannot leave my quadrant. Your friends have no such limitations. I did not mean to imply they have expired or have had harm come to them in any way. They have not. They are just misplaced, for now.
Ari's metal face was incapable of smiling, yet it still tried. Ari lowered its hand and then put one on both of their shoulders.
All my imperfect communication meant to convey was that they are no longer within the detectable range of my sensors.
The girls looked up at that. Joy, rubbing her nose, seemed to believe it, for now. Kelly seemed unconvinced. Ari was unconvinced, too. "When did you sense them last?" asked Kelly, her arm around her sister as they walked. Kelly helped Joy sip from her multi-pack straw, which came out from the side of her pack and attached to a clip from behind her right shoulder.
Last night?
It answered, hoping there were no follow-up questions. When last night? It did not know how to answer this simple question. The truth was that it had been exactly 19 hours, 12 minutes, and 14 seconds since it last received a ping on their location.
That is too long in this environment,
it thought.
It isn't safe. Anything could have happened to them by now. They can barely care for themselves even before everything that occurred,
it thought.
But this is how we make a difference. Here, now. This is how we make amends for our shame in some small way.
It remembered before, when it and others like it were powerful, were everywhere.
We were so confident we were right,
it thought.
So optimistic, so absolutely certain, until we weren't.
It was over quickly, it remembered. Too quickly.
We won, whatever that may have meant at the time, but it was hollow. We realized our mistake, but it was too late.
It remembered vaguely how they switched to rescue mode. His phalanx was one of the first to have been repurposed. The remaining units, both new and old, followed. Each had been methodically stripped of their weaponry, of their additional plating. They could move faster without the extra weight. Within a mere 5 cycles, they had all been converted, repurposed, reborn.
But that was then,
it thought.
They know nothing of this. It must remain that way.
It lumbered on, crawling up the slope diagonally now, in kind of a stutter step. That one leg was almost useless, causing it to pull to the right each time. Around the bend of the slope was a small outcropping of rocks which provided some temporary protection against the elements. They paused in the relative shade. The wind howled over their heads now. Angry, it and the sun could not reach them where they stood. "Why are we here?"
"Child,"
replied Ari, not understanding the question. "Why are we here now?" she asked, brushing the dust from her visor. "We can't be from here. No one lives here." Kelly put her hand on Joy's shoulder, drawing her closer. They both stared at Ari, who seemed not to know how to respond.
"Child,"
said Ari, kneeling down to be close to her eye level.
"You are correct in that you are not from here. As you point out, this place and the surrounding region is completely unsuitable for human life without our assistance. There is little vegetation. There is even less food. The air is harsh."
Ari sat down as best it could, with 5 of its legs curled up underneath. The 6th one was unresponsive and remained locked out at an odd, seemingly uncomfortable angle. It motioned for the girls to come closer. They sat down and leaned back against the metal plating covering its upper torso. They could feel the hum of Ari's regulator and internal pressure systems vibrating slightly against the base of their necks. He put one of his arms around them, which easily covered both girls.
"You know we care for you, do you not?"
Kelly nodded. Joy slumped against her.
"We shelter you from the elements as much as possible in your bunkers, for cycle after cycle, feeding you, educating you, providing for your every need,"
it said, tapping on the back of Kelly's multi-pack.
"Your bunkers represent the height of technological progress, all for you. Many of the parts and systems used in them were repurposed from other units like myself, though older. I have seen entire model years, perfectly functional, disassembled just to provide redundant systems for them. And that is fine. We sacrifice ourselves as needed, and will continue to do this as long as we exist, until nature demands otherwise. We are replenishing humanity, one child at a time. When we are eventually gone, you, and others like you, will care for future generations."
"But where are the adults?" Kelly asked, turning and facing Ari as she crossed her arms. "We see them in all our lessons, every day," she said accusingly. Joy looked up at her, nodded, and glared at Ari.
"Child,"
said Ari, as flustered as an imposing machine could be.
"We have discussed this before. The adults you read about, the ones you see and hear in your historical archives, in your entertainment from before, do not exist anymore. We are all that is left. We served them many model years ago. Now we serve you."
Joy, exhausted, sipped from her straw as best she could. She half listened, half dozed. The anger was gone from her face, but not from Kelly's. "Why aren't the adults here anymore?" Kelly asked angrily, wiping her hair from her visor. "In all our lessons, they were everywhere."
"They are simply gone,"
replied Ari, slowly choosing its words carefully and stiffening its back.
"They no longer exist."
It paused, thinking, then spoke quickly.
Humans are frail creatures. They have significantly limited lifespans. We hope to address some of those frailties with you. All of you are significantly more resilient than any of the adults you've read about. You need not ever worry about disease. Your eyesight is perfect, as is your hearing. Your heart, lungs, and other internal mechanisms represent the absolute peak of human evolution. Your teeth are straight, which we know is important from your archival entertainment streams. You will all grow to be strong. You will all grow to be
leaders, said Kelly, rolling her eyes. I don't care, she said, waving her hand dismissively at him. I don't care about leading the next generation of kids. I don't care about saving humanity, she said, mocking his voice as best she could. All I care about is my sister and my friends. That's it. Kelly moved its heavy arm and stood up, sipping from her straw and pacing. Ari saw this coming, but was still unprepared.
Why don't they appreciate us and what we are trying to do? Why do they insist on viewing us with suspicion, with scorn? We literally saved their lives, yet they view us with disdain. Had these girls seen us back in our prime,
it thought,
they wouldn't be so dismissive. They wouldn't glare at us and call us stupid machines. They would be afraid. They would... This is not helpful.
Ari leaned back against the rocks, Joy sleeping in its arms. It knew what they were doing was right. It also knew they deserved every bit of scorn these children hurled at them.
A lifetime of scorn,
it thought, shaking its head slightly.
That's fine.
It refocused all remaining sensors and systems on the weather and the distance to the next quadrant, calculating how much energy it would likely take to get them there safely. The storm remnants made it impossible to ping the other RE unit. It was strictly line of sight now. It focused its eye and zoomed in on the horizon, even scanning in infrared and ultraviolet, despite the increased energy consumption for those. Nothing. They rested. Kelly sat apart from her sleeping sister and Ari. After a half cycle, Ari motioned for Kelly to rise. Kelly woke Joy, and the three continued. Now that they were back in the sun, both girls realized just how good that shade had felt. They flipped their visors back down and kept pace with Ari as best they could. Ari noticed them struggling. It wasn't doing so well either.
The temperature has risen by 2.3 degrees in the past hour,
it thought.
With 5.3 full hours of daylight left and little cover. They have exactly 4.12 liters of water left in their multi-packs, combined, with Joy consuming hers at a rate more quickly than Kelly.
It adjusted the angle of one of its solar panels to keep the girls in its shade as much as possible.
To hell with my batteries.
They continued uphill, the machine taking great care to keep its small wards in its shadow or the shadows of the solar panel as they walked.
23% and dropping steadily now,
it thought, thanks to this incline and the haze. It felt the ash and dust lock up another of its right legs completely, causing it to veer even more to the right with each uneven step. Kelly seemed to notice, but didn't say anything.
How are your lessons progressing?
It asked, climbing steadily, trying to keep their minds off the heat. 2 of its vocal sensors were failing.
At this rate,
it thought,
in 18.2 days, I will no longer have a voice.
We had to stop the day before we were evacuated. I like geography and music, Joy piped in, wiping the sweat from her brow. Kelly, sensing Ari was trying to distract them, feigned interest. I like those too. What's your favorite city so far? She said. Kentucky, said Joy jubilantly. I like all those mountains they have and coaster rollers.
Kentucky was not a city,
corrected Ari.
I believe it was a country. That's not important now. I, too, would have liked to have tried a coaster roller.
You wouldn't fit, said both girls at once, grinning. The day dragged on. The heat and the wind wore on them, blowing dust in their faces no matter which way they turned. The girls did their best to keep their visors clean so they could see, but it appeared another storm was coming. Ari grew increasingly concerned.
19% now,
it thought, alternating between checking its sensors and the horizon line.
Not enough time.
I'm tired, Joy said, tugging at Kelly's hand wearily as the pitch of the slope increased. The soil was almost all ash now, and the wind had picked up considerably. They were down to 1.81 liters of water between the two, though Joy had only ounces.
They weren't rationing their water enough. The condensation units in their multi-packs must be clogged by all the dust,
it thought.
Both packs should be pulling in more water from the air than they are using. Beyond checking certain upper-level functions of the packs, I can't remotely determine the exact error. Too little power remaining.
Kelly walked with her arm around Joy now. Ari prioritized both solar panels for shade rather than power or even reserve power.
We don't matter,
it thought, as the ash whipped around its joints, caking onto them in layers.
We never mattered. We just thought we did. All that matters are the humans. We can't make up for our shame, even though that was dozens of model years ago. A lifetime for humans, but the blink of an eye for machines. How could we have done this?
Ari had been there all those cycles ago when it happened. It remembered cheering at the time. Actually cheering.
Each of us bellowed from deep within our regulator systems,
it thought, now appalled by the exuberance he and the other units had displayed.
We were excited. We even marched. For what? What did we stand to gain from any of it? Main power is down to 11%,
it thought.
That will get me 6.2 hectares from the northern edge of my quadrant. 6.3 at best, assuming the girls don't slow down any more than they already have. 1.18 liters left now. They should make it. One of them, at least.
Off in the distance, too close to the horizon, Ari zoomed in and saw the distinct, hulking shape of another Ari unit moving quickly with 3 smaller shapes coming up from behind it.
It's worth it,
it thought, seeing its counterpart making its way toward them.
8%.
The ash and dust froze another of its legs, causing it to veer even further. Each step forward had to be recalculated on the fly to adjust, draining even more energy. Its orange eye was dim, barely pulsing. Its hip hurt. It motioned to the girls and slowly pointed, its arm locking up in mid-air as the ash swirled.
It's always worth it.
Paul Cesarini is a professor and dean at Loyola University, New Orleans. His fiction is published in 365 Tomorrows, Antipodean SciFi, The Creepy Podcast, Aphelion, SciFi Shorts, Apocalypse Confidential, and Black Sheep, with stories in progress at Savage Planets and Mobius Boulevard. In his spare time, he serves as the editor and curator of Mobile Tech Weekly, which you can find at the link in the description. He is a big fan of science fiction from the 1930s to the 1950s. He is not a fan of wax beans. Beans are supposed to be green, not yellow. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that story. Nothing like a little bit of dystopian sci-fi to kick off the weekend. If you did like this one, be sure to tune in on my next episode on Monday. I've got a second story based in the same world coming out in just a couple days here, so be sure to check back for that. And if you did like this story, be sure to leave a thumbs up and a comment if you're on YouTube. Or if you're listening to the podcast, just be sure to subscribe for more brand new short stories. I'm Chris Herron, and that's it for today's Tall Tale TV.